Mason Collins never expected to be the first human to make physical contact with an alien species. As the lead engineer aboard the research vessel Starlight, his job was maintaining equipment, not establishing interspecies relations. He was 32 years old, with dark hair that never seemed to stay neat and hands that were always slightly stained with machine oil, no matter how many times he washed them. Mason liked problems he could solve with tools and logic. People were harder. Aliens would be impossible. The day began like any other. Mason woke up in his small cabin, showered, and headed to the mess hall for breakfast. He sat with Sam Wilson, a communications officer, and Kate Barnes, one of the pilots. They talked about home, about Earth, about the families they left behind for this 3-year research mission to the outer planets. It was their usual morning ritual, comfortable and predictable. Then the alarms started. Unidentified object approaching Jupiter orbit, the ship AI announced in its calm voice. All senior staff report to command deck immediately. Mason wasn't senior staff, but as head of engineering, he was expected during emergencies. He abandoned his half-eaten breakfast and rushed to the command deck. Captain LeVar Reed was already there, her face serious as she studied the main view screen. "What is it?" Mason asked Sam, who was busy at the communications station. "No idea. It just appeared. No warning, no approach trajectory. 1 minute, nothing. Then boom, there it was." Sam looked both scared and excited. "It's not one of ours." The object on the screen didn't look like any spacecraft Mason had ever seen. It had no visible engines, no recognizable command section. It resembled a giant seed pod, iridescent and smooth, about twice the size of their own ship. "It's broadcasting," Sam announced suddenly. "Some kind of mathematical sequence. Captain, I think it's a distress signal." For the next 6 hours, everyone worked non-stop. Scientists analyzed the signal, determining it used prime numbers and geometric constants that would be recognized by any technologically advanced species. Sam and his team worked to establish communication protocols. Captain Reed consulted with Earth Command, awaiting instructions. Mason mostly watched and waited. This wasn't his area of expertise. But as the hours passed, he found himself drawn into the discussion when Sam managed to establish a visual link with the alien vessel. The image on the screen made everyone fall silent. The being looked almost human, but wrong in subtle, unsettling ways. Its proportions were too perfect, its movements too fluid. Its skin shimmered with colors that shifted like oil on water. Its eyes were large and reflective, showing no pupils or irises, just mirrored surfaces that reflected the inside of their own ship. "Hello," Captain Reed said, taking the lead. "We are humans from planet Earth. We received your distress signal." The alien responded with a series of sounds. The ship AI analyzed them, creating a rudimentary translation matrix. The words that came through were broken and strange. "Help, ... system failure. Life support ... dying." Captain Reed looked at Mason. "What kind of life support issues could they be having?" Mason shrugged. "Could be anything. Air recycling, temperature regulation, radiation shielding. Without knowing their biology or technology, it's impossible to say." "They're sending technical data," Sam announced. "The AI is processing it now." Diagrams appeared on a secondary screen, showing what appeared to be mechanical and biological systems integrated together in ways Mason had never seen before. But despite the alien design, he recognized the basic principles. "It's their atmospheric regulation system," he said, studying the diagrams. "Something damaged it. See this section here? That's where the problem is. They can't maintain whatever gas mixture they breathe." Captain Reed frowned. "Can we help them?" "Maybe," Mason said. "The principles seem similar to our own systems, just more advanced. If I could see it up close." The next hour was a blur of preparation and debate. Earth Command authorized a rescue mission with strict protocols. A team would go to the alien vessel, assess the situation, and provide humanitarian aid if possible. Captain Reed selected Dr. Lily Parker, the ship's xenobiologist, Lieutenant Alan Wright for security, and to his surprise, Mason himself. "Why?" "Me?" he asked when she told him. Because you understand life support systems better than anyone on this ship, she replied. And because sometimes, Mason, the best diplomacy is just fixing what's broken? Mason spent the next few hours studying the alien schematics and packing tools he thought might help. His hands worked automatically while his mind raced. He had never imagined being part of something so historic. First contact. The thought made his stomach tight with anxiety. In the shuttle bay, Mason checked his environmental suit one last time. The shuttle that would take them to the alien vessel was small, designed for short trips between ships or to planetary surfaces. Lily sat beside him, her face thoughtful behind her helmet visor. "Nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," Mason admitted. "You? Excited?" "This is why I became a xenobiologist. To meet something truly different." Her eyes were bright with anticipation. Lieutenant Wright was less enthusiastic. "Remember the protocols?" he said as the shuttle detached from the starlight. "No unnecessary risks. We help if we can, but our safety comes first." The journey to the alien ship took 20 minutes. As they approached, Mason was struck by its beauty. The surface wasn't metal as he'd first thought, but something that seemed alive, pulsing, with soft light that followed the shuttle's approach. "It's responding to us," Lily whispered. The hull might have some kind of sensory capability. They docked at what appeared to be an airlock. After cycling through, they entered the alien vessel. The interior was unlike anything Mason had imagined. The corridors seemed to flow rather than connect, with no visible seams or joints. Everything pulsed with the same bioluminescence as the hull, creating patterns that moved with them as they walked. Two aliens met them. Up close, they were even more unnerving. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, with limbs that seemed too long, and joints that bent in ways that made Mason's mind struggle to process. Their environmental suits weren't rigid like human spacesuits, but appeared to be a second skin that shifted and adapted continuously. The taller alien approached them, its skin cycling through blues and greens. Through the translation program, it introduced itself with sounds that the AI rendered as "Grace," though Mason suspected that was the program's best approximation rather than an accurate translation. Grace led them deeper into the ship, to a section where the beautiful flowing architecture was disrupted. Here, Mason could see damage, a rupture in the living wall where something had punctured it. A glowing fluid leaked slowly from the wound in the ship, and the air shimmered strangely. Around it, Grace gestured to the damage and then to their own environmental suits. The message was clear even without the translator. Their life support was failing. Because of this breach, Mason approached the damaged section, his engineer's mind already breaking down the problem into solvable parts. As he knelt to examine the rupture, he felt a presence beside him. Grace had joined him, watching his every move with those mirror-like eyes. Mason had come prepared to face the unknown. He had not prepared for the weight of those alien eyes upon him, silently pleading for help. The alien ship hummed with a sound Mason could feel in his bones. It was not mechanical like the familiar vibrations of the Starlight's engines. This sound was almost musical, rising and falling in patterns that seemed random but somehow purposeful. Mason focused on the damaged section of the ship, trying to ignore the strange music and the even stranger being standing beside him. Grace moved her hand over a section of wall. The surface responded, rippling like water, and displayed what Mason recognized as atmospheric data. Even without understanding the alien symbols, he could see the problem. The levels of something were rising while another element was falling. The balance was wrong and getting worse. "I think I understand," Mason said, pointing to the display. "This gas is building up to toxic levels because this system is damaged." He gestured to the leaking component. Lily translated as best she could. Using their rudimentary program, Grace's skin shifted to a deeper blue, which Mason took as confirmation. The second alien, whom they nicknamed Paul because of a marking on his suit that resembled the letter P, approached with what looked like tools. They were unlike any tools Mason had seen before, more like living things themselves. They pulsed with the same bioluminescence as the ship, and seemed to change shape slightly as Paul handled them. Mason examined the damaged component more closely. It appeared to be part biological and part mechanical, a hybrid technology far beyond human capabilities. The puncture had torn through multiple layers, each seemingly designed to process different atmospheric elements. The luminescent fluid that leaked out appeared to be both coolant and processing medium. I need to understand how this system works before I can fix it, Mason said. Lily translated, and Grace responded by taking one of the tools from Paul. She made a series of gestures over the damaged area, causing the display to change, showing the system in operation. Mason watched carefully, beginning to grasp the principles behind the alien technology. I think I can help, he said finally. But it will take time, and I'll need both of you to assist me. As they worked, Mason became aware of subtle changes in the ship around them. The beautiful flowing patterns in the walls began to stutter and fade in places. The musical humming developed discordant notes that grew more pronounced. The ship is alive, isn't it? Mason asked during a pause in their work. Or partly alive, Lily translated his question. Grace's skin flashed with rapid color changes before settling into a pattern of swirling purples and blues. The translator struggled with her response, but Mason understood enough. The ship is connected to them. It's not just a vessel, it's part of their community. Working with the aliens was challenging but fascinating. Mason had to forget much of what he knew about engineering and learn new principles on the fly. The aliens communicated through color changes and subtle movements as much as through their strange language, making the translator program only partially useful. Despite these obstacles, they made progress. Mason figured out how to bypass the damaged section using principles similar to those in human life support systems. The alien technology was more advanced, but the basic problems of maintaining a breathable atmosphere were universal. Lieutenant Wright kept his distance, watching the proceedings with obvious tension. His hand never strayed far from his sidearm, though Captain Reed had been clear that weapons were an absolute last resort. Wright's wariness made the aliens nervous, their skin colors shifting to muted tones whenever he moved closer. Could you give us some space? Mason asked him after a particularly tense moment when Wright had stepped forward suddenly, causing Paul to back away rapidly. You're making them uncomfortable, and this is delicate work. Wright frowned but retreated a few steps, giving them room to work while still maintaining visual contact. Mason turned back to the repair, trying to focus despite the growing pressure. The ship's discordant sounds were increasing, and he noticed Grace's movements becoming less fluid, more erratic. Are you okay? Mason asked her. Grace's skin, which had been shifting through blues and greens, now displayed patches of dull gray. She made a gesture that needed no translation, a universal sign for continue, hurry. I think she's being affected by the atmospheric deterioration, Lily said. Quietly. Their species must be more sensitive to the changes than we are in our suits. Mason worked faster. The repair was complicated, requiring him to integrate human tools with alien technology in ways neither was designed for. But as the hours passed, he began to see progress. The leaking fluid slowed, then stopped. The atmospheric readings began to stabilize. Grace and Paul worked alongside him tirelessly, their movements becoming more coordinated with his as they developed a wordless understanding. They anticipated what tools he needed, adjusted systems in advance of his requests, and made subtle improvements to his approach that he might not have considered. Near the 4-hour mark of their work, Mason noticed something odd about Grace's environmental suit. Unlike human suits, which were rigid and separate from the wearer, the alien suits seemed to be a living extension of their bodies. Grace's suit pulsed with the same color patterns as her skin, and when she moved, it flowed with her in perfect harmony. During a brief rest period, Mason asked Lily about it. She conferred with the aliens, the translation program struggling to keep up with the complex concepts. Their suits are partially biological, Lily explained, her voice filled with scientific wonder. They're grown rather than manufactured, using genetic material from the wearer. The suit is Not exactly alive, but not completely separate from them either. It's a symbiotic relationship. This revelation changed how Mason approached the repairs. He began to treat the ship's systems not as machines, but as living things that needed healing as much as fixing. This subtle shift in perspective improved his effectiveness, and the repair work accelerated. 6 hours after they had boarded the alien vessel, they were approaching a solution. The atmospheric systems were stabilizing and the ship's discordant humming had begun to return to its earlier musical quality. Grace's skin had regained some of its vibrant color patterns. Though the gray patches remained, they were making final adjustments when disaster struck. A secondary system, stressed beyond its limits by their temporary bypasses, suddenly failed. A pressure valve burst, sending a spray of caustic fluid into the air. Grace moved with surprising speed, pushing Mason clear as the fluid arced toward him. Most of it hit her environmental suit, immediately causing visible damage to its surface. The fluid sizzled against the living material of her suit, eating through the outer layers. Grace collapsed to the floor, her skin cycling rapidly through colors in what Mason instinctively recognized as distress. Paul rushed to her side, making urgent sounds that the translator couldn't process. What happened? What's wrong with her? Lieutenant Wright demanded, moving closer with his hand on his weapon. Mason ignored him, kneeling beside Grace. The damage to her suit was severe, spreading outward from the initial contact points like a disease. If her suit was truly connected to her, as Lily had explained, this wasn't just equipment failure. Grace herself was being injured. We need to help her, Mason said, looking at Paul desperately. Tell me how to help her. Paul made urgent sounds while gesturing at Grace. Her skin had turned a dull gray color all over, no longer shifting through the beautiful patterns of before. The caustic fluid continued to eat through her suit, creating spreading patches of damage. Mason could see that the inner layers were beginning to fail. We need to get her back to our ship, Lily suggested. Our medical team might be able to help. Paul made a sharp motion with his hand. The translation program interpreted his sounds. No move, dangerous, fix here. He's right, Mason said, studying the damage. If her suit is connected to her biology like you explained, moving her could make things worse. We need to repair it now. Lieutenant Wright spoke into his CUM unit, explaining the situation to Captain Reed. His voice was tense but professional. Request instructions, Captain. We have an injured alien and a deteriorating situation. Mason tuned out the conversation, focusing entirely on Grace. Her mirror-like eyes were still open, watching him. Despite her alien features, he could read the pain in her posture, in the way her limbs had drawn slightly inward. I need to understand how the suit works, Mason said to Paul. Can you show me? Paul hesitated, then placed his hand on a nearby wall. The ship responded, displaying complex diagrams that shifted and changed. Mason recognized them as schematics for the environmental suits, but they were far more complex than he had imagined. The suit wasn't just a protective covering. It was a complete life support system with multiple integrated functions. This is beyond me, Mason admitted, feeling helpless. I don't understand enough about your technology. Paul made a series of sounds. The translator struggled but produced principle same, different application. Mason looked again at the diagrams, forcing himself to see past the alien design to the underlying engineering concepts. Slowly it began to make sense. The suit regulated temperature, filtered air, processed waste, and monitored vital functions, just like human environmental suits, but with biological components instead of mechanical ones. The damage is spreading because the suit's self-healing. Function is compromised, Mason said, pointing to a section of the diagram. If we can stabilize this area, the suit might be able to repair itself. Paul confirmed this with a color change across his skin. He retrieved more tools from the storage area, including several containers of what appeared to be living tissue suspended in gel. Mason realized these were repair materials for the biological components of the suit. Working together, they began treating Grace's suit. Mason applied human medical concepts, thinking of the process as surgery rather than engineering. The suit material responded to their interventions. Sometimes pulling away from damaged areas like an injured animal recoiling from pain, Grace remained conscious throughout the procedure, watching silently as they worked. Her stillness was unnerving. Mason had become accustomed to the alien's constant fluid movements. This absolute immobility seemed wrong, dangerous. Lily monitored Grace's condition using a scanner from their medical kit. Her vital signs are weakening, she reported after an hour of work. Whatever their equivalent of blood pressure is, it's dropping. Mason felt sweat beading on his forehead inside his helmet. The repair was delicate, requiring steady hands and precise movements. The alien tools were difficult to use, designed for hands with different proportions and joints. Several times, Paul had to take over when Mason's human limitations became apparent. Talk to her, Mason suggested to Lily. Keep her engaged. We can't let her lose consciousness. Lily nodded and moved closer to Grace's head. She began speaking in a calm, steady voice, asking questions about Grace's world, her people, her journey to our solar system. The translation program converted Lily's words, and occasionally Grace would respond with brief sounds or subtle color changes in her skin. Through this halting conversation, they learned fragments of the alien story. They called themselves, a name that the translator rendered as the Continuing. Their home planet had been destroyed by a cosmic catastrophe. A nearby star had gone supernova, bathing their world in lethal radiation. They had been traveling for what translated to approximately 50 Earth years, searching for a suitable new home. Why our solar system? Lily asked. Grace's response came slowly, her skin barely managing a faint color pulse. Life compatible. Samples preserve? Samples? What samples? Lily pressed gently. Before Grace could respond, Paul made an urgent sound. Mason looked up from his work to see a new problem. One of the suit's primary systems was failing completely. The damage was spreading faster than they could repair it. We need something to contain the caustic agent, Mason said, examining the deteriorating areas. It's still active, still eating through the material. Lieutenant Wright, who had been keeping his distance, stepped forward. Would this help? He removed a container from his utility belt. It's a universal neutralizer for chemical spills. Standard equipment for away missions. Mason took the container gratefully. This might work. The chemistry will be different, but the principles should be similar. They applied the neutralizer to the damaged areas. The effect was immediate. The spreading deterioration slowed, then stopped. The edges of the damaged sections began to stabilize, no longer actively degrading. Now we can focus on repair rather than just containment, Mason said with relief. For the next 3 hours, they worked methodically to restore Grace's suit functions. Paul provided materials and guidance, showing Mason how to apply the living tissues to the damaged areas. The process was fascinating. The new tissues integrated with the existing suit material, forming connections and gradually taking on the same properties. As they worked, Mason became aware of subtle changes in the ship around them. The discordant notes in its humming had faded, replaced by a smoother, more harmonious sound. The flowing patterns in the walls had stabilized, no longer stuttering or fading. The ship was responding to her distress, Mason realized aloud. It's connected to them emotionally as well as physically. Lily nodded. Their technology isn't separate from them the way ours is. It's an extension of them, responding to their needs and feelings. By the 5th hour of the repair, Grace's condition had stabilized. Her skin showed faint traces of color returning, though the vibrant patterns of before were still absent. The suit was functioning again, though at a reduced capacity. Paul communicated that it would continue to heal itself now that the critical systems were restored. Captain Reed's voice came through their units. Status report. Lieutenant, it's been over 11 hours since you boarded. Earth Command is getting anxious. Situation under control, Captain, Wright responded. The alien ship's life support is repaired, and we've treated an injury to one of the aliens. Request permission to remain until we're certain of their stability. Granted, Reed replied. But I want hourly updates. As Wright stepped away to provide details to the captain, Mason continued making small adjustments to Grace's suit. The work was no longer urgent but still required attention to detail. Paul had moved to check on the ship's systems. Leaving Mason alone with Grace. She watched him work, her mirrored eyes reflecting his movements. Despite hours of intense interaction, Grace remained mysterious to him, her thoughts and feelings hidden behind her alien physiology and the barriers of language. Yet Mason felt a connection forming, the universal bond between the one who helps and the one who is helped. He wondered what she saw when she looked at him. Did humans seem as strange to her as her species did to him? Did she find his fixed skin color and rigid movements as unsettling as he initially found her fluid grace and shifting colors? Mason finished securing a final connection in her suit. As he withdrew his hands, Grace moved for the first time in hours. She reached out, slowly, her elongated fingers extending toward his gloved hand. Grace's long fingers touched Mason's gloved hand. The contact was gentle, almost hesitant. Through his suit, Mason could feel a faint vibration, as if her touch carried some kind of energy. He remained still, unsure what the gesture meant, but sensing its importance. After a moment, Grace withdrew her hand. Her skin rippled with faint blue colors, the first strong color pattern since her injury. The translator picked up soft sounds she made. Gratitude, life debt. You're welcome. Mason replied simply. Anyone would have done the same. Paul returned, his skin showing patterns that Mason was beginning to recognize as concern. He checked Grace's suit, making small adjustments to Mason's work. Then he turned to the humans and made a series of sounds that the translator rendered as need show something important. Lieutenant Wright frowned. We should report back to the ship first. We've been here too long already. 5 more minutes, Lily urged. This could be significant. Wright hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. 5 minutes, no more. Paul led them deeper into the alien ship, to a section they hadn't seen before. As they walked, Mason noticed Grace, rising slowly to her feet, her movements still stiff but improving. She followed behind them, moving carefully. The corridor opened into a vast chamber that took Mason's breath away. The walls were lined with thousands of transparent containers, each glowing with its own soft light. Inside the containers were various objects. Some looked like plants, others like small animals. Some were simply colored liquids or crystalline structures. What is this place? Lily asked, her voice filled with wonder. Paul gestured around the room. The translator struggled with his explanation, but key phrases came through. Last remains. Homeworld. All species, all ecosystems. It's an ark. Mason realized they're carrying samples of their entire planet's biology. Lily moved closer to one of the containers, examining the strange plant-like organism inside. This is incredible. They've preserved their planet's biodiversity. Paul continued his explanation, the translator working hard to keep up. Search new home. Compatible world. Preserve life. They're looking for a planet where they can re-establish their ecosystems, Lily interpreted. They're ecological refugees. Wright's voice cut through their wonder. So they came here looking for a new planet? Earth? Paul's skin darkened, and he made a negative gesture. The translator provided, not take, share, study compatibility, some species only. They don't want to colonize Earth, Mason explained to Wright. They just want to see if some of their biological samples could survive here. Grace had made her way to one of the containers. She touched it gently, and the organism inside seemed to respond, pulsing with light. Her skin reflected the same pattern, creating a beautiful synchronicity between her and the preserved life form. They have a connection to these organisms, Lily observed. It's not just preservation, it's a relationship. Mason realized something else as he looked around the chamber. This is why the ship is partly alive. It's not just a vessel. It's part of the preservation system. The ship itself is maintaining these samples, keeping them viable during the journey. Paul confirmed this with color patterns across his skin. The translator added, ship grows, adapts, protects. Wright checked his watch. Time's up. We need to report this to Captain Reed in Earth Command. As they prepared to leave the chamber, Grace approached Mason again. She held out something small and glowing, a tiny container similar to the larger ones in the chamber, but sized to fit in a human hand. Inside was what looked like a small seed pod, pulsing with gentle light. "What is this?" Mason asked. The translator conveyed Grace's response. "Gift, gratitude, compatible with Earth, harmless, beautiful." Mason looked to Lily. "Is it safe to accept?" Lily hesitated. "Protocol says no exchange of biological materials without proper containment and study." "Take readings," Wright suggested, surprising both of them with his compromise. "If it checks out as non-toxic, non-invasive, we can consider." Lily ran her scanner over the small container. After a moment, she nodded. "It registers as plant material, no toxins, no detectable pathogens. The container appears to be completely sealed." Mason carefully accepted the gift, placing it in a secure pocket of his suit. "Thank you," he told Grace. "We'll treasure this." As they left the chamber and made their way back to the airlock, Mason found himself thinking about the implications of what they had discovered. The aliens weren't explorers or conquerors, they were refugees, carrying the last remains of their world, searching for a place where at least some fragment of their home could survive. Back at the airlock, Pohl made one final communication. "Return soon? Help more repairs?" Mason looked to Wright, who nodded slightly. "We'll discuss it with our captain. I think we can arrange further assistance." As they prepared to return to their shuttle, Grace approached Mason one last time. Her movements were more fluid now, her skin showing stronger color patterns. The suit was healing, just as they had hoped. She made no sound, but the colors on. Her skin formed complex, beautiful patterns that needed no translation. Gratitude, connection, perhaps even friendship. The journey back to the starlight was quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Mason kept his hand near the pocket containing Grace's gift, feeling a strange sense of responsibility. They had come expecting to find aliens and had instead found refugees, survivors carrying the precious remains of a lost world. Captain Reed met them in the shuttle bay, her expression a mixture of relief and curiosity. "Report, Lieutenant. What did you find?" Wright stood at attention. "Captain, the situation is stable. We successfully repaired their life support systems and assisted with a medical emergency. The aliens are refugees, ma'am. Their planet was destroyed, and they're carrying biological samples, looking for compatible ecosystems." Reed's eyebrows rose. "Refugees? Not explorers or colonizers?" "No, ma'am," Lily confirmed. "They call themselves the Continuing. They're trying to preserve what's left of their world's biodiversity. They came to our solar system to study compatibility, not to settle." "I see." Reed considered this information. "And you believe they pose no threat?" "No threat, Captain," Mason said with certainty. "They need help, not confrontation," Reed nodded slowly. "I'll relay this to Earth Command. In the meantime, all of you report to medical for standard post-contact protocols." In the medical bay, Dr. Ben Foster examined them thoroughly, checking for any alien contaminants or unexpected effects from their time on the alien vessel. Mason mentioned the gift from Grace, showing the small container to the doctor. "Interesting," Foster said, examining it through the sealed container. "I'd like to keep this in a secure lab for further study, if you don't mind." Mason hesitated, feeling strangely protective of the gift. "It's important that it's treated with respect, Doctor. It's not just a specimen, it's a piece of their lost world." Foster's expression softened. "I understand. We'll treat it with the utmost care." Later, after debriefing and a much-needed meal, Mason stood at a viewport, looking out at the alien vessel glowing softly against the backdrop of Jupiter. The ship seemed more alive to him now that he understood its nature, not just a vehicle but a guardian, a living ark carrying the precious remains of a destroyed world. He thought about Grace, about her silent endurance during the repair process, about the moment her fingers had touched his hand. Despite all the differences between their species, despite the barriers of language and biology, they had connected through the universal language of helping and being helped. Earth commands. Response came 8 hours later. To Mason's relief, they authorized further assistance to the aliens along with a scientific exchange program. A team of specialists would be dispatched to help with additional repairs and to learn more about the aliens' biological preservation methods. Mason volunteered immediately to return to the alien vessel. Captain Reed approved his request with a knowing smile. "They seem to trust you, Collins. That makes you our best ambassador." As he prepared for his second visit, Mason realized that in helping fix their ship, he had become part of something much larger, the preservation of an entire world's legacy, carried across the stars by the last survivors of a cosmic tragedy. 3 weeks had passed since first contact with the aliens. The Starlight had become the center of an unprecedented scientific exchange, with daily shuttles traveling between the human ship and the alien vessel. Teams of specialists from both ships worked together, learning from each other, building bridges across the vast differences that separated their species. Mason had made the journey between ships so many times that the process had become routine. Today, he carried with him something special, the small seed pod Grace had given him, finally cleared by Earth Command for return to its original container. The scientists had studied it thoroughly, confirming it was harmless to Earth's ecosystem. Before allowing Mason to take it back as he entered the alien ship, he noticed immediately how much it had changed. The damaged sections were fully repaired, the bioluminescent patterns stronger and more vibrant than before. The ship seemed healthier, more alive. Mason wondered how much of that was due to the repairs and how much was due to the growing connection between humans and the continuing. Grace met him at the airlock. Her suit had completely healed, showing no signs of the damage that had nearly killed her. Her skin cycled through bright colors when she saw him, a greeting that needed no translation. "Hello, Grace," Mason said, smiling behind his helmet visor. Over the weeks, they had developed their own system of communication, a mixture of the translation program, color patterns, gestures, and shared experiences. "I brought something for you." He carefully removed the container with the seed pod from his pocket. Grace's color patterns intensified when she saw it, rippling across her skin in waves of blue and purple. She took the container with careful movements, her elongated fingers cradling it gently. The translator picked up her soft sounds. "Thought lost. Important species." "Thank you. The scientists studied it," Mason explained. "They say it could grow on Earth. Some regions have compatible conditions." Grace's colors shifted to a pattern Mason had come to recognize as excitement or happiness. She gestured for him to follow her, leading him not to the preservation chamber, but to a new area of the ship he hadn't seen before. This room was smaller, more intimate. The walls pulsed with gentle light, creating patterns that seemed to follow their movements. In the center of the room was a table-like structure that rose from the floor, its surface displaying what looked like star maps and planetary data. Paul was already there, working with the displays. He acknowledged Mason with a color change, then returned to his work. Over the weeks, Paul had emerged as something like a scientist or researcher among the continuing, often working directly with the human xenobiologists. Grace placed the container with the seed pod on a small pedestal near the display. Then she touched the wall, causing it to ripple and change. New images appeared, planets, star systems, trajectories. "They're mapping potential compatible worlds," a voice said from behind. Mason, he turned to see Lily entering the room. She had become the primary liaison between the human and alien scientists, spending more time on the alien vessel than on the Starlight. "They've been gathering data from our databases on exoplanets, looking for a new home?" Mason asked. Lily nodded, "But not just any planet. They need specific conditions for their biological samples. Not all of them can survive in the same environment." Grace made a series of sounds. The translator interpreted, "Some here, some there. Different worlds. For different life." "They're planning to distribute their biological archive across multiple planets," Lily explained, "increasing the chances that at least some of their world's life will survive." Mason studied the star map. "And Earth? Is it one of their destinations?" Grace's color shifted to a gentle blue. The translator provided, "Small contribution only." "With permission? Mutual exchange?" They're proposing a limited introduction of some of their plant species, Lily clarified. Species that could enhance our ecosystems without disrupting them. In exchange, they're asking for samples of Earth life to add to their archive. Preservation mutual benefit, Grace added through the translator. Both worlds continue. The concept was beautiful in its simplicity. Two civilizations, one ancient and nearly lost, one young and still growing, helping to preserve each other's legacy among the stars. It wasn't conquest or colonization, but cooperation and mutual preservation. Earth Command had initially been cautious about any exchange of biological materials, but as they learned more about the continuing and their mission, attitudes had shifted. The potential benefits of controlled introduction of compatible alien plant species, some with remarkable properties for carbon capture or soil regeneration, were too significant to ignore. A delegation from Earth was scheduled to arrive within the month to formalize the agreement. Politicians and diplomats would take over the process that had begun with a simple repair mission. Mason wondered if they would understand what he had come to understand, that beneath all the differences in biology and culture, both species shared a fundamental desire to protect life, to ensure that something of their world would continue even after they were gone. As they discussed the plans, Mason noticed Grace moving to a small alcove in the wall. She returned with something in her hands, a small device unlike anything Mason had seen before. It was roughly cylindrical, with a transparent section that glowed with soft blue light. Grace offered it to Mason. The translator conveyed, "For you. Record memories, important moments preserved?" Mason accepted the device carefully. "What does it do?" "It's some kind of memory recorder," Lily explained after examining it. "From what I understand, it captures not just images but sensory data, emotional context. It's how they preserve their experiences." Grace touched the device in Mason's hands, activating something within it. The blue glow intensified briefly, then settled into a gentle pulsing rhythm. Through the translator, Grace explained, "Contains memory. When you fixed suit, important moment." Mason was stunned by the gift's significance. Grace had recorded her memory of the moments when he had saved her life, when their two species had first truly connected. It was more personal, more meaningful than any diplomatic document could ever be. "Thank you," he said simply. "I'll treasure this." In the days that followed, the exchange of knowledge and resources between the ships intensified. Human engineers helped the continuing upgrade their propulsion systems for the long journey ahead. Alien biologists shared techniques for preserving genetic material that would revolutionize Earth's conservation efforts. Medical specialists from both species discovered surprising similarities in their approaches to healing. Despite vast differences in biology. 1 month after first contact, a ceremony was held in the Starlight's main hangar. Representatives from Earth met with the continuing to sign the first interspecies treaty in human history. The agreement was simple: a limited exchange of biological materials, scientific cooperation, and the establishment of communication protocols for future contact. As the continuing continued their journey through the stars, Mason attended the ceremony wearing his dress uniform, feeling somewhat out of place among the diplomats and officials. He stood at the back of the crowd, watching as humans and aliens formalized what had begun with a broken life support system and a simple repair. After the official proceedings, Grace sought him out. She approached him without her environmental suit. The hangar's atmosphere had been carefully adjusted to accommodate both species for the historic occasion. Up close, without the suit between them, her alien nature was even more apparent, but no longer strange or unsettling to Mason's eyes. She held out her hand in the human gesture of handshaking that she had learned. Mason took her hand carefully. Her skin was warm and slightly textured, pulsing with color where they touched. "Continue journey soon," she said, the translator picking up her words, "but return someday. Check how seeds grow." "You'll always be welcome here," Mason replied. "Safe travels among the stars." As they stood there, hands clasped between their different worlds, Mason felt something wet touch his skin. A small droplet of luminescent fluid had formed at the corner of Grace's mirrored eye and fallen onto his hand. The translator remained silent. There were no words for this moment. Mason understood without explanation. For the continuing, such secretions were rare and significant, a physical manifestation of a memory being permanently encoded. Grace was marking this moment, this connection, as something to be remembered always. She said nothing while he fixed her suit, then a single tear touched his hand. And in that moment, across the vast differences of biology and culture and worlds, two beings from distant stars truly understood each other.